Yeah, I'm jumping right into this, aren't I? So right now, we're going to have Mackenzie and Patrick come up in a second. I figured after this amazing trip, why not get the band back together for one more time before they go off to college. So when I first came here and planned this trip, it was something that was pivotal in my life, so I wanted to give that to the youth in my group, for the youth that are loyal to me. I wanted to give them an amazing experience. Then about 2 weeks before the trip, I was thinking, what am I doing? We've raised over $24,000 to get these kids here. We've done all this. Is it really going to work out? Is this really going to happen? Then all of a sudden I was down there with 20 people that had never been in this country before, had never gone through anything like this. And I was the only one who had. So guess who got all the questions? It was awesome. But then we settled in, and I likened it to taking your kids to Disney World. I cried a lot too. It's like taking your kids to Disney World. It's something that, it's fun for you each time, but when you get to take somebody you care about and watch them grow, there were times that they would be like, why are you just sitting there? And I'm like, I don't really have to do much. You guys have the love of Christ in your heart, and it's amazing. So to hear a little bit more about these and other fun adventures, here's Patrick and Mackenzie.
We're back!
We don't need Dory or Nemo to help us find God's glory.
We found it all on our own and are here to share our most memorable experiences from Nicaragua.
Flying in was like being in a movie. You looked out the window after seeing miles and miles of ocean, and sitting there is a volcano.
After the initial shock of seeing a volcano wears off, the houses come into view. They're all small, flat-roofed, and never-ending.
You don't know where one house begins and another ends, or whether it's a house, store, doctor's office, or restaurant.
You fly in thinking that you're coming in to help these people and impact their lives.
But then they impact you.
We spent most of our week at La Finca, the Vida Joven Young Life Camp.
And this is where we were transformed the most.
The work was hard, communication sometimes harder, but it made the relationships with the Nicaraguans and our group stronger. We learned to play professional charades, use our English to Spanish dictionaries, and attempt to use our limited remembrance of Spanish from freshman year.
The most basic conversations of your name and age were fairly easy to comprehend, but you want to get to know these people on a deep, personal, and spiritual level and have a deep conversation with them. It's almost impossible without a translator. Their stories and backgrounds aren't always the prettiest picture, but once they let Jesus into their lives, they blossom. Every
night we met to worship at Mega Club. We learned silly dances, sang songs, and listened to a message. At dinner Wednesday night, they told us to dress loco, or crazy. We were unprepared for this, so we turned some clothes backwards, threw on a couple of hats, and went to Mega Club.
Jonathan danced in his skirt, Miss Bishop's skirt, and then things turned a little more serious. Condor and Manuel, two of the Nicaraguans, shared their testimonies and about their lives before they accepted Jesus.
It was very moving how they went from a life of drugs, violence, and gangs to who they are today. They are two of the nicest people you would ever meet, so you would have never guessed that they had such a rough past.
When they first came to Young Life Camp, they came with all their different masks on. As the week of camp went on, they dove all in, and slowly, one by one, their masks fell off. By the end of the week, they had Jesus in their hearts, no masks on, and found the love of Christ and the power that He has to transform lives.
Now, the work ethic of the Nicas is unbelievable. They're like machines. No, wait, they are machines, and rarely need breaks. The Nicas work so hard for what to us seems like so little, but they know no different from what they have, and are always happy with the little that they do have.
Another thing that makes them very happy is music and dancing.
Yeah, that's right. One day, at lunch, our Nicaraguan friend, Rafael, showed us one of the ways he learns English. He listens to American music and has the lyrics on his phone in English and Spanish, so that way he can read and sing along. Some of his favorites are Jason Derulo, Imagine Dragons, Skrillex, and Guns N' Roses. It was amazing to see his determination to be able to communicate with us in our language, even though we were visiting his country.
The life-changing portion of the trip for me was the labyrinth. We walked in the dark, over a creek, and stood at the front entrance to what looked like a maze. We were handed a verse from the Bible before we entered the labyrinth. I read my verse and began walking down the narrow path that was ahead, where no decisions had to be made. You just follow the path. The moon and the stars were so bright and crystal clear that night that I was able to turn my flashlight off and continue walking. It was so silent and peaceful, listening to the nature that surrounded you. There were no airplanes flying overhead and no phones going off. It was just you, God, and the sounds of nature. I prayed and listened through the whole walk and just felt a sense of calm and peace come over me. The twists and turns of the labyrinth brought you to a cross. We sat down and waited for everyone to make their way, and Omar talked about how life has one beginning and one end. It all begins and ends with God, and how someday we will be with him where it all began. After Omar's message, we walked around the cross, giving hugs of peace to every person that was there. Jonathan was my last peace hug, and when he touched me and hugged me, something collapsed inside my heart. A giant void had opened inside my chest, and before I could figure out what had happened, it was replaced with this feeling of light and warmth. All of a sudden, I began to cry. This year, I have grown so much in my faith, and I've grown closer to God, and this was the moment I realized just how much I had grown. I realized that my growth had never stopped or slowed down, and that I never wanted it to stop. In that moment, I wanted to do more and be more, and my life had changed for good.
Another cool, 20s, part of the trip was getting to play baseball. 20s is Nicaraguan slang for cool or awesome. We got to play baseball not just once, but twice. The second time, the weather rolled in, and I don't mean rain, I mean a cloud. The Young Life camp sits at one of the highest points in Nicaragua, so we were playing baseball at the top of the world. And then, all of a sudden, you couldn't see 20 feet in front of me, let alone Hannah standing in the outfield. Well, we had no weather delays, we continued to play. It was just a blast being able to play alongside the Nicaraguans and with our youth group. Now, when you go into something like this, you think, I'm on a mission trip, I'm going to go help people, be a big help, and change their lives.
But that's not the case. We feel that they changed us, our lives, and the way we think. Our perspective shifted, and our mindsets changed, and coming home was a giant culture shock.
One thing we learned quickly was Nika time. They're never in a rush to get anywhere or to finish a job as efficiently as possible, just so they can get on to the next one.
This is where we learn to be very flexible. Jobs didn't always get done the American way or the efficient and quick way. Sometimes the Nika way took 10 times longer and was 10 times harder, but it made you appreciate getting the job done more rather than just rushing through it.
For example, on Friday, we trekked up a loose gravel hill that was probably 0.2 of a mile long, filled a wheelbarrow with gravel, and carefully walked it back down the hill without dumping the gravel everywhere. The reason we were doing this was to fill a trench by the new dorms to cover the plumbing pipes. We made about 10 trips in an hour and a half.
During snack, we sat in our wheelbarrows and debated about how we could do this in a more American way. Driving by us at the top of the hill was some sort of construction machine.
You mean a front loader?
Well, it looked like it could have done the job a little bit faster and a lot less trips than it would have taken us.
So the Nika driving it agreed to help us out.
We finished moving the gravel in no time and completed the covering of the plumbing pipes.
Through all of these hard jobs, hard times communicating, it softened all of us and made us grow closer to each other and God.
By doing the work for His kingdom, we grew in our faith, made new friendships, and strengthened the relationship with the people that we came with. We also wanted to thank you, the congregation, for your support and prayers along our journey.
We had such a great experience that we're already packing our bags to go back and be able to receive the glory of God from the Nicaraguan people all over again. And now we have a video.
I feel it's important to share with you what I learned about Young Life in Nicaragua, because I had a different concept of what I thought it was. And I'm not sure what it is in the United States. I haven't had time to research that. But in Nicaragua, Young Life, in general, like I said, a little bit off. The focus on Young Life in Nicaragua is all on Jesus, and that's Jesus, for those of you who don't know. And they make it very clear that they really have no reference to the Old Testament. It's all about Jesus and how He transforms lives. They target at-risk kids, and I'm not sure anyone in that country under 20 years old is not at risk. It's pretty wild place. But they target them and they recruit them, for lack of a better word, and they just walk up to people casually who they think may benefit from learning about Jesus and going to Young Life. And they invite them to what they call club. And we had Club on video. That's where we made those benches, and that's where we spent a day. And this is a big deal for them. These kids don't have a lot to do in Nicaragua. So once a week, this particular one, it was on a Saturday night, they gather for Club, and they do a couple skits. There is sometimes some singing, and then there's a testimonial / message, and it ends with a question. And the question is kind of a challenge to yourself. And it was really interesting to be part of that. You saw some of that in the pictures. Omar, who kind of runs the camp up on the top of the mountain where we're at, told me that they approach these kids out of the clear blue, as he was approached by his mentor. And they just try to gain their trust through offering to play baseball, basketball, some kind of sport. They get some interaction with them, and if it goes well enough, after a couple encounters, they encourage them to come to club, and they get to experience the silliness. And if that goes well, he makes a home visit, assuming that child has a home, which is not always the case, and then has to convince the parent, or parents if there are two, to let that kid go up to the top of the mountain for a week and experience Young Life. So it's pretty amazing how it works and how they just hit the streets. And again, I don't know how it works in the U.S. I'm interested to learn that, but over there, I mean, they're just walking up to people and shaking their hand and trying to earn their trust. It's absolutely amazing. Then the line eventually becomes to these kids who they've gained their trust. Do you want to go spend the best week of your entire life? Well, it's not that much of an exaggeration. They have so little to work with and to live with in the cities. The poverty is rampant. I was floored by the poverty. So it's not a tough sell. Do you want to come up and have the best week of your life? We're going to give you a nice bed. We're going to feed you, and we're going to love on you until you can't stand it. After a while, going back to the same house with dirt floors and limited running water, it's not a bad idea, and they get them. And once they get them up there to Young Life, that's where the transformation occurs. And I heard it from so many of the guys who have been through the program. And the transformation occurs, and it changes lives. I mean, they learn about Jesus where they probably had never been exposed to Jesus before, and they see firsthand through the interaction of those people who work the camp what it feels like to be loved on. A great example of this was this guy Douglas. Douglas is about 5'6" or 7", probably weighs 250, 260. He worked up on the coffee fields with us, and I don't even know how he got up there, to be honest with you. It was so hard just to walk up there. But long story short, Douglas was a leader, or the leader, of the most notorious gang in Matagalpa, the capital city. And he joined the gang when he was 12. He was in it until he was 22. He's got some horror stories about what he saw and what he did. But when he finally accepted the call to go up there to the top of the mountain, which is, for him it was about 3 hours away, he went with his gang, and they went up there. And I didn't ask him how many it was. It was really tough communicating. This was all through an interpreter in the middle of our slavery. And for lack of a better word, I worked really hard, I promise you. But he told me that when his gang was up there, he had his knife, and his other gang members had their, I don't know if they had a piece, I don't know what they had, and I asked him if they were patted down, and we couldn't quite get that communication together. But what he told me was, after about day 2, he and his gang, these were the bad guys. I mean, to this day, by the way, Douglas is revered in Madagascar. He's feared, even though he's got a love in his heart, he's a changed person. But he and his gang were standing off to the side, and they were going to be tough. They were going to keep their arms, and they were going to not let this work. And he said by day 3, after watching all of the other folks, which included other gang members that he knew, seeing their frowns go to smiles, seeing the love and affection amongst each other and their interaction with the people at the camp, he and his gang decided to put their weapons down and join in because it beat the alternative. That, to me, that testimony from him was the best example of what Young Life does for that population over there. It was amazing. And to have this joyful man, he kept with Miranda, 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 Miranda. That was the only English word he could say. He tried to say my name. By the way, they can't say Rick, it's only Ricky. So he was able to pronounce that. Very strange. I'm running out of time. I got to tell you a couple more stories. Manuel, who also worked with us a lot on the mountain, he told a story one night of how his mentor, recruiter, Condor, big man, recruited him, and we were working on him, and the night he finally decided to go and accept the invitation at the top of the mountain was a night when he was at a party in a 2-story house, and there was lots of madness going on. His pockets were filled with drugs because that's how he made a living, and Condor came to that house to announce that there's going to be a raid that's going down. Everybody who's, the 2 or 3 cops that are in that city are going to make an arrest. And so Manuel jumped out the 2nd-story window. And to escape, he jumps out, and I don't know if Condor saw him do it or what. Condor was waiting for him and says, "Are you ready now?" Emptied his pockets right there. And he accepted the invitation to go up. And he is one of the nicest, kind-hearted people you would ever meet to this day. There's a man named Holman, who we were introduced to, and I just got to tell you this quick story. He is now the actual country director for Young Life. He took over, and it's very smart, well-speaking English, incredible what he does. But he was telling us growing up about his textbooks and how he learned math. And in his textbooks, and I thought he was joking until I approached him afterwards, the math equations were 2 machine guns plus 1 machine gun equals how many machine guns? And there was pictures. 4 hand grenades plus 5 hand grenades equals how many hand grenades? And that's the way he was raised. And the father, if he was present, was typically a disciplinarian from the military. And it's just a different life. A different life than I was raised, I'm sure most of us. That was one good story. I'm going to skip the details. I wanted to share with you the bus ride from the airport to Matagalpa, which was 2 hours. It was incredible. I looked out the window, and it's better than any movie I've seen in my entire life. In a good way and a bad way, but the one reoccurring theme is poverty. It's sad, it's real, but I mean, they have so little material things. We're so spoiled, we're so overwhelmed with stuff that until you see that, you really can't understand it and put it into perspective. We spent an interesting night, our first night. First of all, the bus ride, they dropped us off at the Clue, which we were going to be working on the following day. And to get to this, we had to go into the city in this school bus with no AC, by the way, and manage our way down these streets about as wide as this aisle right here, and with maybe this much room on each side of each mirror. And as we're negotiating through mopeds, cars, stray dogs, people, produce piled up on the side, pull carts, it was just amazing. And the streets were all busted up and not in good shape. No traffic signs, no street lights, and none of the streets have any names. And I'm not kidding. I mean, they do not have a postal system, and that's it. So we get dropped off. This is where we're going to work the next day. And we say, okay, well, here's your home sponsor, here's your homestay person. We all get assigned to our people. We all walk different directions. I mean, the 20 of us get split up in groups of 2 or 3. And I'm watching my friends walk away. They're all going different directions. I had Miranda and Lily and myself when we went on home with Mariela. It was sweet. And it just hit me. I mean, here we are in this strange country. I can't even communicate with anyone except in my immediate group. And we're walking down these streets. I got these 2 blonde girls wearing shorts. And Mariela, who's a local, and she seemed to know a lot. It was just wild. It was incredible. Tried to sleep that night. Wasn't easy. It was kind of warm in the second story of that house, but we were one of the fortunate ones. We had a bathroom with a toilet inside the house. Not everyone did. We had floors that were concrete. Some of the other homestays were dirt with an outhouse. But one thing that was consistent for all of us was the noise that took place throughout the night. And it was insane. I mean, there was roosters crowing throughout the night. Not at daybreak. I mean, throughout the night, the roosters were crowing. Mariela and her family lived in a section of town that was kind of more commercial. There was a bar next door. I was tempted. A lot of noise going on, a lot of things going on. There was motorcycles going up and down the street, a big dog and a small dog barking at each other all night. There was, I guess, Mexican or Spanish music going on, loud. There was a whistle being blown at like 2 or 3 in the morning. I mean, it was nuts. And I'm laying there in bed, I'm thinking, am I really doing this? Is this happening right now? I felt a little better the next morning when I compared notes with Phil and Carlos and everybody else who had a worse experience than I did. Meanwhile, Miranda and Lily slept like logs. I mean, we're past 10:30. I'm going to cut this short. I could go on. There's so much more I'd love to share with you. But I think it's important that I mention some names. And Douglas is a man I just mentioned, Raphael, Cutie Judy, and her friend, that we forget her name. Does anybody remember the other girl's name?
Hilda.
Gilda.
Yeah, Hilda.
Gilda. I mean, this G pronounced H or the other way around. I'm not sure how that goes. Manuel, Condor, Omar, and my boy Franklin. Franklin took a liking to me. We had a special thing going on. So, I wonder, is it possible to form a strong emotional bond with total strangers in 5 days? Because it happened, I promise you, with all these guys. And I think the answer is yes, because we proved it. Is it possible to form that bond without the presence of Jesus? Not likely. Not based on what I saw. So many things are etched in my mind. The vibrant, bright colors of the buildings and the clothing and whatnot. Beans and rice. Visions of poverty. They're etched in my mind. The relationships formed with the folks I just mentioned, they're etched in my heart. And that's different. A couple things before closing. I have to thank Jonathan McKinney for the coordination and rejuvenation of this youth program. Sandy also deserves some recognition, for the coordination of this trip, which is overwhelming when I thought about how well timed everything was. I mean, we got off the bus, we had something to wait. We had something to wait, we had dinner, we had food waiting. It was incredible how smooth it was, and I told you guys that. So Sandy, not just for the trip, how you've been mentoring Jonathan, it's awesome. This is proof right here. A big thanks to the youth group who traveled with us. Y'all made it easy, and you represented Maitland outstanding. It was fantastic. And a thanks to the other adults that traveled with me, with us. You really helped me maintain my sanity because it pushed me to my limits. It really did. And finally, I'm going to share this with you from Jim Hornsby, who actually brought Young Life to Nicaragua in 1988. He kind of resigned, that guy Holman took over that I spoke of, but he did speak to us that day, and what an interesting fella he was. I mean, his story is amazing in itself. And by the way, he reminded me of George McKay. I see you out there, George. His mannerisms and the way he spoke, and he didn't challenge you, but he really got your wheels turning. And one thing he said after his tremendous life story, which he only did 15 minutes worth, was at some point in life, we have to decide if we're going to get involved in the life of others or we're just going to be spectators. And he is no spectator, I can promise you. And the trip to Nicaragua really inspired me to get off the bench. Thanks.